everybody. We've got an agenda. Okay. Okay. First on our agenda is Professional Standards Commission, Matt Arthur, Executive Director. Thank you, Matt, for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Returning. And so give us a little information, and then we'll ask some questions later on.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having the Georgia Professional Standards Commission here this morning, or this afternoon. Our mission at the PSC is to build the best prepared, most qualified, and most ethical workforce in the nation. And we do that working through 4 different areas. We do it through education preparation, we do it through certification, our ethics division, and the assessments that teachers have. Our budget, I believe, is on page 9. It starts at 27.6.1. You have it in front of you. I'm not going to go through everything. Our budget for FY20 was $7,383,615, and our budget for FY21 is $6,913,121. And so the total cut for our agency is $470,494. What I can tell you about these cuts is that we're making a lot of staffing changes to meet this number. We are moving some people around in some other divisions. Some people are going part-time, and we have a couple of vacant positions that we are eliminating. We are drastically cutting travel and doing as much as we can virtual learning with all the RESAs and the HR directors out there and the college deans. So we're reducing the off-site events that we host. In the past, we have been able to host off-site events either for HR directors or college deans and vice presidents, but we're not able to do that. We're not able to pay them to come to those meetings, and so we're looking at different ways of doing things. We're increasing the use of webinars and changing a lot of the tools that we use, not only in getting the information out there, but for teachers and how they apply. Our first priority is to protect the work that we do in certification, ethics, and education preparation. And so as we look at these cuts, we can't falter in any of those 3 areas. We're not an agency that takes in any money. All the teacher tests, all the things that do cost money that teachers have to pay for, they don't come to us. They go directly to the testing companies. So we don't take in any money at all. You know, and we're going to continue to pursue getting the information out, be more proactive than we've been, I think, in the past, and maintain the collaborative approach that we do. We don't do anything just by the PSC. Everything we do, we work with teacher groups, we work with leadership groups, and of course we work with the colleges that are educating our future teachers and leaders. And we're going to continue that. We're continually looking for ways to streamline and simplify our processes for teachers, for potential teachers, for current teachers, and leaders. And we have started some things this winter that we're already streamlining. We hope to see the difference. We feel like we're going to see a difference in the man hours that it's taken us to do, but it's also going to help them out. But we don't have any data right now to show that, but we have begun, and we are still looking at ways to do it and are not going to stop that. We set the standards, a little bit more about us in detail. We set the standards and regulate the programs and providers that prepare education for certification. So all the colleges, we have 71 approved providers across the state, and we have 899 approved programs. Every college, any entity that produces a teacher or a teacher leader has to go through us. So we have to approve that program before it is. We have the PPEMs, which is the preparation education monitor that we do. It's on our website. You can see how the colleges in your area are doing. We use an assessment tool with them, and we also use interviews with their past students, interviews with their current students, and the teachers in the schools that those teachers go to judge how they're doing. And it's a very good tool. We've given a couple of presentations to it, but it combines candidate test scores, candidate and employer surveys and observations, and tells us, but it tells the public, this is all public knowledge, tells the public how that college is, how they're doing producing teachers and leaders, how they're performing. But it's a good tool that gives us some information, and most of them do fairly well. The others we're working with to improve. Once educators have the requisite preparation, we certify them. Certification's the core really of what we do. That's what you hear about more than anything else. It's our largest division, and we have a very efficient certification process right now. You can get, if you do everything the correct way and turn it in and everything's approved, you can get that certification back in 6 days, which compared with other states, all other states, you're talking months to get that certification back. So we have a very good process. That doesn't mean that we can't streamline it even more and make it easier and do away with the paper trail, and that's what we're working on. Even the strategic waivers and the charter systems in schools, the majority of them, even though they can waive it, they still want their teachers, and teachers themselves want to be certified through the Georgia Professional Standards Commission. They want that certification in hand. It does mean something, and we're going to continue making it mean something. To get a sense of the number of people we serve across the state, in FY19, there were over 311,000 individuals with active credentials at the end. During that same period of time, we issued over 117,000, really closer to 118,000 new certificates during FY19. So even though it's a small, compact agency, we do work with a lot of individuals that are out there. During that same period of time, we took 126,000 emails and over 82,000 phone calls that we answered and got back to them. And so we are a busy agency. We also deliver training to school HR personnel on how to make sure their teachers go through the proper processes to maintain or obtain certification. We also work with all the college certification across the state, those 71 providers. We host Teach Georgia. I don't know that people are aware of that, but if there's an opening in the state of Georgia, that opening is posted on our website on Teach Georgia. And we also have started a Troops to Teachers program. We work with all the military personnel in the state or their spouses or a relative that want to go in the teaching field or are already in the teaching field. And that Troops to Teachers program's in its 2nd year, and we're seeing a huge success with that. We work with DECAL and DOE, of course, all the time, almost weekly with them. And so we work with a lot of different groups, and we hope we feel like we really make an impact across the state. And of course, in any profession, when you deal with people, there are those that step outside the bounds. And so the Professional Standards Commission, we receive about 130 ethic complaints a month. In FY19, we opened 1,276 different cases for teachers or leaders across the state. So we had that many investigations ongoing. We have 7 investigators and 1 paralegal. And so that volume is high because every one of those cases is investigated. And so by the end of January this year, we were 382 cases behind. We've got 382 cases that are backlogged. With 7 investigators and that many cases coming in, we've seen the cases grow. Potential students that are getting certification to become teachers have 2 ethics tests right now that they have to take. We're looking at different ways to get that done. You can imagine that the longer that a case lingers, the more difficult it is to investigate. People move, people forget, and so we try to jump on them as fast as possible, but we do have a backlog there. We've been proactive, feel like so far, in emphasizing the ethics instruction across the state, and like I said, we require those tests, but we are still in the process of working on that and more tools than we can. We do our best to mitigate the impact of these cuts. We're working through it like all the agencies, and we're committed to making sure that Georgia teachers, leaders, and service personnel are qualified and schools have certified teachers in a place in a timely manner. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Arthurby, for coming. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm not an educator, never been one, and I know you've got a lot of experience in it, but you're fairly new at this job, so I hope I ask something you can answer. I'm getting lots. We hear over and over how there's a shortage of teachers, how so few teachers are going into that profession, and I just worry about the requirements that we're putting on new teachers, new students coming out of college, trying to go in the professional field. Is it Ed TPA? Is that what it is?
There is
preparation they do.
Right.
Can you address that? What you said your turnaround's real quick, but some of these preparations is pretty costly and time consuming for our students coming out of college. I'm being told.
Right.
Are you looking into that? Is that
Absolutely.
a barrier to some young people trying to go into education?
You know, coming from, I was in education in K-12 for over 30 years, and then I've been at the Technical College for the last 5. Coming back into it, one of the things that we are talking about and we're looking at, we've already started meeting, if a potential teacher goes through the process of becoming a teacher and they have to take all the tests from the Georgia Ed TPA to ethics and everything else, they could spend $681 if they pass everything and if everything goes well. It's $681. Well, coming from TCSG, I also know that to become a nurse, it costs about $400 plus a $40 certificate to take a test. I know that the LSAT, to become the bar exam costs about $442 or something. So it's something we've got to look at. We've got to make it it's a complex problem, and it's hard to put a simple answer to it, but there are things that we can do to help make that simpler. A lot of those costs come the last semester that student's in college also, which I know coming from higher ed, that is sometimes the toughest time for those students to get money. Pell Grant may be gone. They might have used 127 hours in Hope. Everything could be gone. They're trying to move out of wherever they're in. So it is definitely things that we are looking at and studying right now, and you can expect some changes.
So those students have to come out of pocket. Hope doesn't pay for that, or any other thing?
Hope doesn't, Pell doesn't, that's right.
Nothing pays. They got to come out of pocket.
Out of pocket for it.
So $681, that is paid to a testing company.
Right, that's right. Pearson, ETS.
Pearson's the biggest.
Or two
so
of them.
you don't have any input into what those tests cost or a contract? Do you, or how does that work?
What's what I'm looking into right now. One test, the ethics tests are $30 a piece.
Huh.
If you didn't score high enough in high school where your SAT or SAT, that test that you have to take to get in the program is $128.
Yeah.
Ed TPA is $300. I've been there about a month and a half, but I've been it's caught my eye.
Well,
So we
good.
are
It's
definitely
been
studying that.
brought to my attention, and I think it's something we really need to look in. Thank you for wanting to tackle that.
I just had a daughter go through it about 3 years ago, so that,
Okay.
I understand.
I see a question from Chairman Nix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say I know that what y'all do is, you're not, a lot of people don't know what you do, but it's such a critical mission, and I really appreciate that. I had just a couple of questions. Tell me again the number of backlog ethics cases?
382.
392.
88, sorry, Chairman,
382.
382 as of January.
Okay. And you got seven
7 investigators.
So how long do you think it would take them to get there? Do they have a certain period of time they have to get that turned around?
We try to do it in 30 days, but it depends on the case. Some cases are real simple and some of them are very complex with what's going on. So some of them take longer than that. While we've got 382 backlog in January, for the month of February, we're averaging 130.
Yeah.
So we got 130 more on top of that 382. So at the end of February, we're going to be deeper in debt.
So your each examiner's got
Right.
a couple of hundred by the time you add all that up that
Yeah.
they're working on.
Yeah.
Do you think that staff is sufficient to handle that?
No, sir. Obviously it didn't.
Okay.
From being there 6 weeks,
Yeah.
obviously it's not. Obviously we need at least one more investigator.
Mr. Chairman, one other question if I might. The only thing I saw in there, other than that comment that caught my eye, you talk about legal services, you're reducing it by 90,000. How do y'all get your legal services?
Now, we do have, we have a lawyer there, but for any cases that they appeal, it goes to the Attorney General, so that money's for a SAG
Okay.
out of the Attorney General's office.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I've got one more question. I want to go back and speak to the budget, this last line item, 27.6.11. You're saying you use existing funds to develop the automation certification, evaluations, and approvals. Can you speak to a little bit about this automation and I assume, looking at no cut there, you do have the funds to implement that, and when will that be implemented?
Well, that 23,000 in the past is part of what's being used from April to August. They've had overtime. And so it's been about $44,000. We've had to pay 2 people overtime to get the certificates to the people so they can teach in the fall, or else we'd have an overload there. And so OPB put the $23,000 for us to work on automation. They took it out of the overtime and said we'll work on automation, which we are doing. We've been doing it before this was put in. How that money is going to be spent, I don't know. We put the automation in for renewals. We put the automation. The next one is the conversion of that 5-year induction certificate to help them out. So there's a crunch time that we have to meet in order for them to walk in the classroom in August. And it's going to take overtime this summer to do, and we're hopeful that we're able to pull it out of there. Again, it's cheaper doing the overtime for the few months than it is hiring somebody.
So we're going to have overtime people, we're going to have people on furlough. Did I hear you say that?
I'd say furlough.
You said.
I said some have gone to part-time.
Right, and then we're going to have raises for some folks that are making less than 40.
Right.
Is
Right.
that money adequate? How many of those you have? You have
We've
some
got-
part-time people too.
I've got that. We've got 19. I believe that I've got that number. It's 19 the total that we're getting is about $2,000 and some dollars short of what it's gonna cost us to do the 1,000.
Okay, so we got a wide range of, you get your hands full over there with, this, so, thank you. Are there any other questions from my committee? Representative Stovall.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Commissioner. I actually have two questions. One, you had mentioned earlier about the training of the HR personnel. Would this also, when you train the HR, is this like for the district, school district personnel or the individual schools?
Well, it depends on what the schools have. Some of them may have an individual school, some of them, it may be just one for the whole district. We train them all. We'll
Okay.
train them both.
Okay, so I was just thinking about the charter schools that might
Yep.
be open up there and handling their own
Absolutely.
HR. Okay. And the second question I have is, what other organization in the state besides you all that gives certifications for teachers?
None.
Y'all the only one?
We're it.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Nix has got one more question
Okay.
for you, Matt.
Just one more, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As you can tell from my question, I'm concerned about the ethics backlog. On 27.6.7, you say reduce funds for 2 vacant positions. Would those happen to be ethics investigators? 27.6.7, reduce funds for 2 vacant positions.
Yeah, what happened, we had the positions and we planned on hiring them in FY20. And one of the positions, the investigator never left. And so it's not a vacant position. The position was cut, but we've still got the person. So we gotta figure out how we're gonna pay him, because we definitely can't cut him. But he was listed as a vacant position, but he never left.
And he
He's
is an
still there.
He's an
Right.
investigator?
Sir?
Is he an investigator?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And our investigators don't have an education background. They're all from GBI or investigators with sheriff's office.
Okay.
And so that's one of the vacant positions. The certification is the other vacant. Both of them were not investigators. Only one was an investigator, but we still have him. But we did lose the money to pay him.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from my committee? We'll see you none. Thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
We'll look hard at this budget and appreciate what you do. Okay, next on our agenda is Pat Schofield, Director of Pupil Transportation, Department of Ed. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Dickey and members of the committee. It's certainly my pleasure to be here today and have the opportunity to come before you all and express not necessarily concerns, but provide some information for you all on the status of our school bus fleet and a little bit about funding, some background on that as well. First, let me say thank you for the funds appropriated in the past. I know this committee in the House has always been at the forefront of funding for pupil transportation and providing new buses across the state. The last 2 years, been over $50 million appropriated for new buses. We're very thankful for that and blessed to be able to get that funding. Our local districts are thankful. They're never going to be totally happy, but they're very thankful for what they get. Our school buses are no doubt the safest form of transportation for our students to and from school, and certainly school activities. If we operated as one unit, pupil transportation departments, this is from my understanding, and I don't necessarily have this background, from my understanding, our pupil transportation departments as a whole would be the largest mass fleet in the state. So speaking of that, we currently have 20,200 buses across the state of Georgia. Of those buses, so every day we run 14,761 routes. Now that's coming from a superintendent's report that's based on FY19. Our most current superintendent's report will be due in the next few months. So we don't have current data on this year, so just be aware of that. But last year's routes was 14,761, transporting over 1 million students to school every day and over 1 million home every afternoon. So we have tremendous responsibility as they transport those students. Currently, of that 20,200, 5,714 of those buses are out of what we would consider the life cycle of that bus. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit. Type C is a conventional school bus. The life cycle of a Type C school bus by board rule is 10 years. Life cycle of a Type D bus, which is a 78 to 90 passenger school bus, is 14 years. So as we pulled the numbers just this week, on Monday, we pulled our current maintenance numbers. There were 20,200 buses, 206 to be exact. And like I said, of that, 5,714 were outside of those cycles, depending on whether they were Type C or Type D. Understand approximately 60% of our students ride our school buses to and from school. They depend on school buses to get them to school every day and get them home every afternoon. Our buses travel 771,000 miles every day. That correlates to 140 million miles annually. That doesn't include field trips or extracurricular activities such as activity trips and those type of things. Those are only route miles. We have two funding sources in pupil transportation. One is a QBE funding formula that we've pulled outside of that to make it more transparent, but it's through Q, the funding formula. And then we have the bond funds for new buses. Currently, about 15% of the actual cost of pupil transportation is funded through the current funding formula. So we can talk about that. Our data demonstrates the percentage continues to drop as the transportation cost goes up. So as we have an increase in transportation because everything costs more. Fuel costs more. It's leveled off since 2007 or 8, but it's a fluctuating cost. We have many other things, parts, labor, motors, engines, those type of things. Just the general maintenance has certainly increased over time. The actual statewide cost in FY19 for pupil transportation services was over $936 million. That's money provided to us by our accounting review division. And this includes, so in our funding formula, in the QB funding formula statewide for bus drivers, there's $87 million, around $88 million appropriated in that formula for funding the school bus salaries, driver salaries. The actual driver salaries, based on that information we've received in the last expenditure report, was over $344 million. We fund bus liability insurance in our formula. Right around $4 million in our formula is funded for bus liability insurance. The actual cost of that insurance to the local districts is over $17 million. M&O funds, we fund about $38 million in our funding formula. I didn't pull out all the M&O categories in our expenditure report, but just the energy, the fuel cost for our local districts is over $94 million. So we're not anywhere close to where funding in our QB funding formula, funding maintenance and operation for our local transportations departments. There's some other numbers that were that stuck out to me as I looked over that expenditure report. One was about $82 million on the maintenance and just for the salaries of our maintenance staff. And we've put a special emphasis on additional technicians training across the state because we think that's a vital part of keeping our fleet safe. We've put a heavy emphasis that on through our local state organization. And but when I saw $82 million in salaries for those individuals, that's all at local expense. And a lot of times when times get hard, those are expenses they try to cut. So I'll just bring that up. Also, administrative and other people that are very important to local transportation departments are at local expense, around $40 million. So overall cost continues to increase. Just as a side note, back in 2009, we currently funded about $135 million. Back in 2009, that number was $168 million. And there was a huge cut at that time. If we've got a chart, and we'll certainly provide you all with that information of where it was increasing till about 2009, and then it took a dip And we're thankful that it's increasing every year. I'm getting a little bit more, but it's not getting back to that level of where it once was. Also, just to keep in mind, transportation is a very unique tool in the education world. I spoke to a local director yesterday, and I hate to say this, but it was a district where I once served. She sends me a picture of a washed-out road down on the south end of Toombs County, down in southeast Georgia, and she says, "Remember Sam Beasley Road and J.L. Thigpen Road?" And I said, "I remember them well." She said, "Well, let me show you this picture." She's texted it to me. And I said, "You just can't dream these things up. You know, luckily the driver saw the washed-out road and was able to stop, and everyone was safe. But at 6:15 in the morning, it's mighty dark in the bottom end of South Toombs. It's a dark place, so very fortunate that no one was hurt and were able to get that bus turned around. As I stated earlier, 5,714 buses of our current fleet are considered out of cycle. I can't stress that enough. Back in 2017, we were at a very critical point. We were able to meet with the House budget, Senate budget, and the governor's office and discuss many of these needs about our aging fleet. It was, that conversation was centered around some folks were saying we were unsafe. I hope we were not at that point, but our statewide fleet was certainly aging. In 2019, FY19, we approximately appropriated $31 million. That was a stimulus for us across the state. Many buses were purchased at that time. 2019, we've got some information that there was certainly an increase in the number of buses purchased. Districts were making a commitment. What we saw was the districts were making a commitment to bridge that gap between what they were funded through bonds and the needs at the local level. Now, understand we've run in through some good times in the past few years. We've had some districts that needed to really catch up. Our larger districts have really stepped up, and you can see where they've purchased a large number of buses. But the stimulus, in my mind, is all of those districts were afforded a little bit of money from the state. So I have a district that got 10 buses from the state, or 9 buses, maybe 11 buses, I don't want to be quoted, but I saw where they purchased 150, because that's less than 10% of their fleet. So understand we're at a kind of an impasse where we have some districts who are stepping up, and that's somewhat positive. Understand many safety features were installed between 2004 and 2007. Somewhere in those years, safety became a big push. Our state specifications were re-upped. High back seats were part of that, which is a part of the compartmentalization safety on our buses. Additional stop arm lights, which is always a concern while we're loading and unloading students. Braking systems were updated. Air doors were a big thing at that point. Air brakes, air doors, those type of upgrades were coming. The old hydraulic brakes were going were going away. Also, we must understand in today's world, there's new technologies on school buses. Electronic stability control is becoming a standard feature on school buses as we move forward. It's going to be very important to embrace some of these new things as they come forward. Camera systems, security monitoring systems are crucial to the safety of students. Many of our systems are updating those as they move forward. Also, seat belts have to be in the conversation. Fire suppression has to be in the conversation. And collision avoidance technologies are making it into the school bus industry. They're available at this point. So those are things that are on the horizon. Not really on the horizon, they're here for systems to purchase at this time. We continue to work with all of our school systems across the state, we meaning the Department of Transportation, try to provide the highest level of training possible for our drivers and our students from an education standpoint. We believe that's important. When funding is cut, oftentimes, one of the things that lags behind is that effort to continue training, continue providing those extra services to your drivers, and the training for our students goes out the door. I'm very concerned about that and have always been as a director. Just some more data, just another data fact from we pulled from last year's superintendent's report. Of the 14,761 buses that we utilize every day on routes, or utilized last year on routes, 4,130 of those buses were greater than 14 years old. Now you may ask why I use 14 years. Because at some point during our conversations back in 2017, we debated that life cycle of a school bus. I used 14 years in this calculation because that's really where that break in those safety features on new school buses came into effect, around 2006 or 7. So a bus that's older than that 14 years does not have the same safety features as a newer bus, and may be lacking in some of those areas and can be a concern. Once again, I want to say thank you for the funding that's been provided in the past. It's certainly been helpful for our districts, especially our rural districts. I have to mention that because those are the districts, if they're not allocated money through our funding formula or through the bond funding formula, they're not able to purchase purchase a bus on their own many times. We ask that you continue funding pupil transportation at the highest level possible, as these efforts will assist our local districts provide safe school bus transportation for all students. Every student should be afforded the experience to ride to and from school on a safe bus. I thank you for your time, and I'll certainly answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate some really good information. I know we got a few questions.
Okay.
Representative Stovall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, appreciate you coming and making
Yes,
the
ma'am.
presentation. I actually have 2 questions. Okay, the first question is, what type of collaboration is done between DOE and the Department of Transportation for road improvements? So kind of like what you mentioned earlier about them telling you that a road was out and that's using the normal route that the bus goes. So that was the first question I had.
Yeah, I can't say from Department of Ed standpoint. Local districts certainly have contact with local DOT in terms of like in the last week or so with all the rain we've had. But from the DOE perspective, from my role, is I have very little contact with the Department of Transportation. I work very closely with the Department of Public Safety, Motor Carrier Compliance Division, because they conduct our inspections on our buses. I have a very good relationship with Federal Motor Carrier Compliance Division in the state level, but not DOT.
Okay. May I ask a second question, Mr. Chairman? Okay. So the second question I have is, I think it might have been last year before last, we had incentives that I think, put in the budget for efficiency purchases for buses. And I can't remember which county, I don't know if it was Douglas. It was one county, I can't remember which one it was, that had came and done a presentation. And I was just wondering, were those incentives now taken out of the budget? Are they still there? Since we got some old buses, and they're gonna have to be purchasing new ones, and those I know were energy efficient.
Yeah, let me say this. We had some alternative fuel, incentivized money for alternative fuel buses. That was compressed natural gas, CNG buses, electric buses, and propane, those 3 entities. We based that upon state bid prices, so it was different for each vendor. We believe that's had a tremendous impact. I looked, there was 300 and, I looked the other day at a report. It was, in the state of Georgia in FY19, there were 325, don't quote me on the number, something of that nature, propane buses sold in the state of Georgia. I thought that was tremendous. It's moving in an effort for clean fuels. We believe that little incentive, even if it was $8,000 a bus or $7,500 a bus for another manufacturer, but it bridged the gap for many districts, and I think that was very helpful.
Do you know if it'll be cut with this proposed budget?
I'm not aware of it being a part of the current budget.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, I'd like to just give you 3 quick questions, and feel free to be as pithy as you'd like, because I know time
Okay.
is short. First, the 181 school districts, do all of them provide transportation to all of their students? meaning literally no matter where they live, they could live a block away from the school and they still get it. Second, in the school districts that do provide to 100% of the students, for instance, I'm in the Forsyth County School District and we do, has there ever been a consideration to maybe initiate some type of, I'll say, perimeter or diameter around the school saying everyone within 1 mile does not get, I'll say, bus transportation? And then the third one, not to scare the parents out there, I'm only asking for the future, has there been any research done on autonomous vehicles as it relates to buses and them transporting our children maybe by 2030 or 2040? Thank you.
Those are great questions. I appreciate that. Of the 180 school districts that we deal with, I'm aware of 2 that do not transport students except special needs students, and that's only on an as-need basis. Those are 2 city school districts, one in West Georgia, one in Northwest Georgia. When you talk about the parameters in State Law 20-2-188, the funding for pupil transportation exempts any students transported within 1.5 miles.
That's what I thought.
So part of our formula as we do this funding takes those numbers out of the budget, out of the proposed numbers that we prepare.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
So it is up to the local district whether or not they provide that transportation for those students. Many districts have a walk distance. It could be 1 mile, it could be 3/4 of a mile. I get a lot of phone calls in my office in reference to that throughout the years, normally earlier in the school year.
Yeah.
So, but those are local decisions. But if they choose to transport and pick that student up across the road, and transport them to the bus, to the bus drop-off area, that is totally a local decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The autonomous vehicle conversation. Electric buses is a bigger push right now.
Okay.
And we did have some incentivized electric bus money through last year's budget, and we've had 2 districts request that funding.
Okay.
Those buses have not been purchased to my knowledge at this time, but I know there's 2 it's an encouraging aspect. I think that's a great move forward. As I talk with directors across the nation, we believe that's going to be a big push in the next 10 years.
And real quick,
agreed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to know the 2 districts. Do you know the 2 districts that asked for that money?
I'm aware of Bremen City and Tryon City, if I'm not mistaken.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Probably don't want to be quoted on that. Maybe Chickamauga City. There's 2 or 3 that don't provide transportation, being city districicts.
I'm referring to the EVs, the electrical buses. You said there was 2 districts that asked for the EV
Fulton,
grants?
Fulton and Paulding,
Okay, thank you.
so metro areas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm gonna get back to sort of basic, about this budget, make sure my committee, two places we get bonds and this, here in the budget. And what percent of this 140 million in our budget, it covers other than the buying the buses, what percent is that of total cost of student transportation? Would you guess?
So the actual expenditures coded to 2,700, which is a transportation code at a local level.
Yeah.
So if it's coded transportation, so that could be expenses such as, insurance, new buses, that's gonna be sub-pay, that's gonna be everything.
Okay,
It's a long list of categories. That number in FY19 was $936 million for the
936 million.
and we can only expect that to increase annually.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the year before it was 907 million, the year before, if I go
That
back
would be the
3 years.
state's portion or the total? That's total,
That's the-
local and state
That's the local,
cost.
that's what the actual
Local.
cost.
Yeah, actual cost from the local. Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So we're funding 140 million of it plus bond funds.
That's correct. for new
Which,
buses.
how much are bond funds Governor recommend in the 21 budget?
12.5 million.
12.5, okay.
Yeah.
So 140
That does not
plus
fund a
12
bus
point-
for every system who needs a bus, by the way. I'm
Okay.
just throw that out there. I'm not ungrateful, but it's not gonna go around very far. It's 167 buses.
So tell me how tell my committee a little bit how that program works, how those local school systems gain access to that 12.5. They earn it in some way and just,
So that used to be based upon a need formula by a ratio of your need, and we used the allocated bus number. So systems allocated buses. 2 years ago, with the assistance of the budget group, with our budget heads at Senate and House, I think we collaborated and shared our information. We somewhat changed that formula that we think is more beneficial for all districts across the state. And when we looked at that, first thing we did is use the actual number of buses that a system uses. So I could speak for a Forsyth County or a Cobb County or a Fulton County or even a Gwinnett County, where they were allocated a smaller number of buses because they have a lot of kids within that mile and a half that aren't funded. And they've had substantial growth since that allocation occurred and was put in place. Let me get my thoughts back together. So we reworked the formula, and what we've done is used a regular number of buses that they use every day. We think the professionals are at the local district. They know how many buses it takes to get kids home. We then took the number of buses within cycle, subtracted it. If they had more buses within cycle than they actually used, they didn't have a need for a new bus. So they were exempt from the program, and they didn't earn a new bus. But if you were a system where you had a need, the first thing we did in this formula is we gave every system with a need a bus. So a small county in South Georgia, we want to get them, or even North Georgia, wherever that may be, we want to get them out. We want to help them. That was our initiative. So year one, we gave a small county who runs 5 buses a new one. Well, guess what? They won't get a new one for another 3 or 4 because their buses won't be out of cycle, or maybe 2. But that was our push. Let's make sure we give everyone one. Everybody gets one bus. Then we looked at a formula to decide systems who had tremendous growth. Forsyth County, and even in other areas of the state, Bryan County and Effingham County are growing. So they earned extra buses for that growth. So there was another caveat that we kind of manipulated buses, and I have to take responsibility for be the person that makes that decision at the end. Then the extra buses we delivered on an as-need basis, basically using our old formula. And we feel very positive about that. I think across the state, it's been very favorable. It just doesn't work when that number is very low because it doesn't fund one bus for every district that has a need. That's what we're afraid of.
So my mind's kind of churning here. If we were to increase the bond fund, what would it, I guess what I'm really getting at, what would it take to get rid of those 5,700 out-of-date buses? How do we climb out of that hole? How gradual or what sort of incentives would it take to help that process?
We believe, and we expressed this 2 years ago, 800 buses a year. If we could get 800 buses a year.
That's the need.
That would be the need
Yeah.
to get us out of the hole. The caveat here is we don't know how many buses would be purchased by the local district.
Yeah.
So if we went out there and said, this is what we're going to do, we're going to get you, even we'll start at the bottom.
Yeah.
We use 600 buses a year. We used 800 buses. We used 2 different formulas. We just thought it was very important to incentivize those bus purchases. Small districts, if they're in good shape with their SPLOST funds and they've got some, their SPLOST monies can be allocated toward those needs through transportation. If they got 2 from the state, maybe they would buy 3. The local board would pitch in and they would support that. That's what was going on across the state. In a metro area, we were funding 6 or 7 or 8. Local districts would buy 6 or 7 or 8. So it was incentivizing growth throughout the state. It was helping. We talked many different things. Our funding base number was $77,220 per bus. The average cost of a bus in this past year, in the last fiscal year, was $94,000. The lowest bus we had was around 77, a little less than what was funded. But we only had 1 bus that came up underneath that threshold. Most people are getting air conditioning nowadays. Most people are buying some additional incentive, you know, they're doing some different things on buses, some upgrades, the air doors, you know, those type of things we would consider standard.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions for committee? Thank you, very thorough. Appreciate your
Thank
coming
you.
here and giving us that.
Be glad
We,
to supply that information if we need to. Can I get it to you? Okay, thank you all.
thank you. All right, next, John Sorrell, Superintendent Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. Thank you very much.
And I'll introduce Mr. Serrano.
Oh, okay.
You are our state schools director at the Department of Education. So I have the responsibility of supervising our 3 state schools. One is the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf, which is close by us. One is the Georgia School for the Deaf in Cave Spring. And one is the Georgia Academy for the Blind that's in Macon. And I put some data points on here just so you can read at your leisure. I wanted to yield most of my time today to Mr. Serrano. He is actually the building level leader at the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. He's been there for about 3 years, coming up on 3 years. It's close by you all. If you want to get in the car and come over there and sit, it's about 20 minutes from here. You're welcome to come. I did want you to know, and you probably saw it in front of you, 2 of our state schools preceded the Civil War. So they actually have a lot of long-standing history at those institutions. And when I came on board with the DOE about 2 decades ago, they really were asylums. Teachers weren't doing lesson plans. The food isn't something you would feed your own children, those types of things. And over that time span, we've implemented a lot of changes, continuous improvement, with the PSC's help, those types of things. The help of the people in the room, like you heard from Mike with transportation. We work with him closely. So we've come a long way in a relatively short amount of time when you think how long those schools have been in existence. So I'm going to ask Mr. Serrano to come up and speak to you. His school's the baby of the group. It opened in 1972, but they do some marvelous things at that location. So I'm going to ask him to come up and talk to you and still allow time for you all to, if you have any questions or answers, okay? John? You'll notice we have interpreters. So Donna, her colleague, will be interpreting for Mr. Serrano. He will sign, and they will be voicing for you, okay?
So obviously, I won't need a microphone.
Yeah.
And hello, and good afternoon, Chairman Dickey and the committee. I want to thank you for allowing me this time to tell you about our state school, the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. Before I give my presentation, I am the school building leader. I'm a teacher at heart, though, and I want to give a quick mini lesson. I'm going to teach you 3 very important signs. So this sign is the sign for yes. This is the sign for more. And this is the sign for money. And those are 3 important signs for you to take away from today. I do want to take this opportunity to share with you about the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf. We're located in Clarkson, Georgia. It's a small school. However, we have 5 buildings on 14 acres. We have a day school program that serves 183 students. Those students are from 33 counties, and we serve from the preschool level all the way through high school. Also, there are those who remain with us. We extend our program to support them in their transition as according to us through IDEA. And they remain with us through the age of 22. In addition, we serve those who are 15 months old to the age of 2 in a program in coordination with Georgia Pines. This provides early intervention services with families that have deaf and hard of hearing children. Now, about our students, they are from 33 counties, and they qualify for, most of them qualify for free and reduced lunch, or all of them do. They are considered deaf and hard of hearing. There are 29% who have additional impairments, whether mobility, vision loss, or emotional issues, or
They're gonna need us
we
one
serve
places.
Yes,
We
I
need
just
to-
want to get you a mic.
We need to get you on a mic.
Actually, just pick up that mic. I don't know if it's that one or the next. Is that it? Okay, wait, hold on one second. Okay, now try.
Testing one.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So, I don't use microphones. Microphones and myself, we don't mix very well. Doing well. As I mentioned, we serve 33 counties, including the metro area. We have those students, a large number of our students come from Gwinnett, Fulton, and DeKalb. There are some that travel to us from as far away as Macon and Bibb County. And so they travel over an hour because they want their child to be educated at the Atlanta Area School for the Deaf, where they'll get the highest quality of education as possible. We have a close partnership with those school districts. The local school district provides the transportation for their students. It is through their budget. We do provide transportation for field trips or sports events. However, the LEA provides transportation for the student on a daily basis. We have 92 personnel on our staff, 38 who are teachers, and then as Ken Moorhead said, we are historically a new school compared to the other two state schools. Prior to 1972, many families in the metro area, they wanted quality education for their deaf child, but they didn't want to send them to a residential program. And so they fought to get funding to start an elementary school, and that started in 1972, and then expanded in 1978 to a middle school and a high school, and the rest is history. Now, briefly, I want to tell you what makes our school special. It's a fully inclusive signing environment. Many of our students there signed, as I do. We're a bilingual school, which means that we use both English and ASL as our primary modes of communication. English can be written and spoken as well. We have students that are profoundly deaf, as I am, that sign only, and then some who are hard of hearing, which means they have some level of hearing. They can speak well, and they need visual support or visual language, and so we provide a range of services for those students. And as I mentioned, each one of these students is on an IEP as required by IDEA. We provide support service, which includes audiological services, physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling services. We provide that range of services so that our students will thrive. And just as many public schools are, we're required to follow the state testing standards and the graduation requirements. The only difference is that our students are not able to hear, and so we provide support so they can be successful. We also working on expanding our CTAE program. That's something that we're proud of. Even though we're a small school, we provide 6 pathways. That includes plants and landscaping, which is agricultural, audio and visual, technology and film, graphic arts, Internet of Things, and nutrition. Now there's these students, we're investing in them where they get internships and hands-on experience, and at the end of their courses, they'll take an EOPA, an end of placement, and receive a certification where they'll be able to see how their skills have been developed. Now this is through a work-based learning program where the students are working on their job skills, and we have a great partnership within our community, such as Stone Mountain, the Marriott Hotel. Some of our students remain after their work-based learning to become employees there. And so we see that as a success. We have 17 seniors that will be graduating this year, and although we are a small school, we have 5 students that are accepted to 4-year colleges. And then we have several who will be entering into 2-year programs, technical colleges, and others who have already secured employment or have been in transition programs that have designed for students with disabilities. We want to prepare our students for life after school.
Okay.
Now, as for facilities, they were built in 1972, so we do monitor the maintenance that is required, and we have received funding in the past that we use to focus on replacing our HVAC systems, our flooring, provide security for our school, changing our codes, making sure that we remain within code. We have added a new security video system. Those are the areas that we have focused on in maintaining our property so it's a safe learning environment for our students. Now, in closing, I want to say that thank you once again for having me and allowing me to shine the spotlight on AASD. I know that you have a difficulty in your job, but I want you to remember these 3 signs that I taught you today. Now, do we have any questions? Or Dr. Moore?
Well, thank you very much. These schools are very important to our children in our state. I drive by School for the Blind in Macon most every day. Is right, not in my district, but
That's great.
been a very part of Macon there forever. I was looking at the budget, the cuts recommended. Where are we here? The reduce about $2 million. Could we go into some specifics about how those reductions are going to affect these children, and was it positions and
My goal was to protect positions, and from the outset of hearing about the reductions in planning, which, as you can imagine, it took months, weeks, lots of sleepless nights to get those things in place. My goal was to make sure that teachers and students didn't feel it. The school resumed normal operations. And so I targeted areas, I think you heard the gentleman from the PSC and others, travel, those types of things that were sort of low-hanging fruit. Postpone some facility things that weren't urgent necessarily, those types of things. Getting buy-in from my stakeholders at the schools of, okay, are the computers okay? Could they go 1 more year as we make it through this? So collaboratively, we all came together to come up with that amount. And for our schools, the number that we were given was 1.4 million, and that's the number that we reached. So that if you were to walk in our schools, they wouldn't feel it. The classrooms wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't notice anything different from that. It's our jobs to protect those kids and the teachers so that they can do the work that they need to do. But that does mean that we had to make challenging decisions about where those cuts would be made. We were very thoughtful about those things, and so that's how the list was struck.
Thank you. I've got another question about a mobile audio unit. Could you address that, where that is, and if reaching students and
That's fantastic. This body helped fund that. I was approached by Christine Murdoch here, and she had the idea of the state schools kind of using this because, as John said earlier, we do focus on early intervention. If you see in that sheet, you see
Yeah.
more than just 3 schools. We do a lot of outreach.
Like
We never
that.
used to do that, but that's a big passion of mine because we've got to get out there and help these school systems. There might be a teacher in South Georgia that has students that are deaf, and she has nobody to talk to, and they're Googling things on the internet. We don't want that. We built consortiums around the state where they can have peers that they can talk to. So the mobile audiology unit was presented to us. I pulled together, because I don't feel that it's just mine, because we were sought after to implement it. We pulled so many stakeholders from private schools, deaf associations, lots of people from outside the state, and we came up with our vision of what it's almost finished at this point, so we'll have a ribbon cutting ceremony soon. What we found is we got into this data. I'll give you one data point. Hospitals in Georgia, which again, I can't influence what hospitals do. You all don't have some power on some level to do that. But there's a process where when a child gets diagnosed or tested, if you've had children, you've had them go through a hearing test in the hospital. And sometimes they fail that test. And what happens is the person that's giving them the test, nobody wants to tell a parent with this beautiful brand new baby, your child may have a hearing loss or there may be a hearing issue. They typically will say, there's water on the ear, come back and see your, go see your audiologist or pediatrician. We're a big state and we have lots of rural areas with limited resources. What we find is those parents sometimes don't do that follow-up. The kids don't get tested. Months and months go by and they snap their finger, they call the child's name and the child's not responsive. And that's when they start getting a sense of urgency. But sometimes they don't even know where to go to get help for those things. And so part of what we're doing is creating a systemic change here in Georgia, all the way from the birthing hospitals through schools, where people are trained about language nutrition, what that means, being honest with parents. It's much better to say it might be water on the ear or it might be hearing loss, but we're going to be there for you and here are the resources. You don't just send them out of the room with a pamphlet. The mobile audiology unit, the brilliance of you all having that and funding it is we want to get out, particularly in the rural areas where these kids are, just like I said, they got tested, maybe didn't pass, and then they go home and we don't see them until they pop up in an early intervention program, hopefully, oftentimes not, and then public school. And then they're way behind at that point. So the mobile audiology unit, we hired 2 full-time pediatric audiologists. And if you know anything about that, they're unicorns to get. So we got those, some of it because the funding was for the vehicle. So we as a group collectively decided that we have our budget. My schools agreed that this is so important, early intervention is so important, that we're gonna fund some of the positions. And so in addition to that, we have a family engagement coordinator, a speech language pathologist. And so as we're waiting for the vehicle to arrive, these people have not stopped. They've been going around the state because you can do rudimentary assessments. If I brought a machine here, I could test you all. But this van will actually have a machine in it that you probably go to when you have your hearing tested, a booth, an audiology booth. And so that's an issue. Another thing, in these rural areas, if you have a baby that needs to be tested, it's a test called ABR, the baby has to be asleep. So if you're coming from South Georgia, typically to Atlanta, say, to get it tested, if you have kids, what are the chances that kid's gonna be asleep at that perfect moment, right? But if the van is going around the state, it increases that the child will be asleep and the test can be administered. So part of it is helping the actual children get the assessments, getting them diagnosed so that they can get into early intervention at the appropriate time, and then helping them to get supports for them. In parallel to that, a lot of professional learning with teachers around the state about what that means. You all are familiar with the deaf law that passed recently, and that means here in the state of Georgia that every 6 months, if you have a deaf child, birth onward, they get a language assessment every 6 months. And so that way we target them to see what interventions they need. Is this county having a higher number of children that aren't reading on grade level or on a trajectory to 3rd grade reading? That's where we deploy resources, those types of things. But back to the hospital for a minute, they take that information and then they send it about the test results to the Department of Public Health. And as we sort of dug into it, because there's not specific requirements, deadlines that they do, we're finding that some kids' data hasn't been transferred over there. The last one I saw was for 153 days. Think of the time that we've lost in that situation. So I'm the Department of Ed. We have all of these other agencies, but for the first time since I've been here in decades, we're all starting to collaborate. And the mobile audiology, and I'm so glad that you said that, because the first thing that we did is we pulled stakeholders from those other agencies together, people that you never talk to, and I say it's a partnership with all of them. It's not just the state schools mobile audiology unit. In reality, we probably could have 4 of those units rolling around the state because there's such a disparity. And so I think that's going to help address them. If we can get them identified, get them into early intervention, that's the game changer. So I appreciate you asking that question.
Well, thank you. Sounds like a great program,
That's
much
awesome.
needed, and keep the course.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for championing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my committee? Well, thank y'all very much
Thank
for
you, sir.
coming.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Right. That's it. That is the, all we had scheduled. I appreciate the committee, being here. I appreciate those that, brought information. We'll continue our hard work on the 21 budget, and, meeting adjourned.